Hello and welcome. My name is Khachatryan, and today we're continuing our collaboration with 168 Hours in an effort to increase the amount of English language coverage in the midst of the humanitarian crisis in Artsakh, which has entered its 15th day. Today is Monday, December 26, 2022. More than 120,000 people remain trapped in the Republic of Artsakh due to Azerbaijan's blockade of the Lachin or Berzor corridor as this crisis enters its 15th day. And to talk about this, we are joined by Arthur Khachatryan, who is a member of parliament and a member of the Hayastan alliance, also a member of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. In the past, he held government posts such as Deputy Minister of Territorial Administration and Development, Governor of Shirak, and Minister of Agriculture. Hello and welcome, Arthur.
Hello.
Okay, let's begin with our discussion of what transpired on Friday the 23rd in Moscow. The foreign ministers of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia were originally scheduled to meet in a trilateral meeting there, or at least that was what was conveyed by the Russian foreign minister. And the agenda was about the so-called peace negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So Lavrov was there, Bayramov was there, and Arad Mirzoyan was not. And the Russian foreign minister announced that basically Armenia cancelled at the last minute and outside of the normal diplomatic channels. Basically they read the announcement in the news or something. What's your take on this apparent snub to Lavrov and Bayramov by Mirzoyan?
Well, I don't think it was a smart move by the Armenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There were negotiations, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the man, is the position who's supposed to settle issues through negotiations, through diplomatic channels. Two addressees of Armenian blames, Azerbaijan and Russia, were there, and he was supposed to be there and to address all the questions, to say what he, to address all his concerns, accusations, demands to the two ministers. Okay, the diplomacy is called to solve problems, and Moscow at that day was a venue where problems could have been discussed. I'm not saying that during these negotiations or the next day after these negotiations the corridor would be opened, but he is the foreign minister and he shall take care of foreign affairs. Instead of diplomatic duel between Bayramov and Mirzoyan, he from Baku, Mirzoyan from Yerevan, or diplomatic duel between Lavrov and Mirzoyan, Lavrov in Moscow, Mirzoyan in Yerevan, he was supposed to go there and sit with them and say what he thinks. Okay, that's why the ministry is created. That's why the diplomacy exists. But he decided not to go and to send in a statement. So what was that? What was the use of this statement? But if he was there, again, he could put all the arguments. After the negotiations press conference, he could have put all these arguments in front of the international press community. Look, Bayramov what was saying. Complete lies and slanders and excuse my French, complete bullshit.
Right.
And there was no one there to say, no, that's not true. Because Lavrov, Bayramov even accused Armenia for ethnic cleansing today in the territories that are under Azeri control. They're calling it mine crisis, landmine crisis. And he tries to debilitate the conflict into the ecological issue. Okay, it's not we, it's just activists, non-governmental
NGOs,
organizations, a few hundred of them. They came, they have the right to protest because Armenia has depleted natural resources, blah, 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 all the crap. And there was no one, in the same hall to say, no, that's not a ecological issue. And that's not even a humanitarian issue, it's just political issue. And Azerbaijan tried to exert political pressure on Armenia to get extra concessions.
Right.
So the public, the international public shall know that. But he missed his chance.
Well,
and they keep missing their chances. Okay, this issue was debated at the Security Council of the United Nations. Okay, why didn't Armenia, through friendly states, put forward a resolution of the Security Council? Can you imagine what would be the difference in the weights?
We'll talk about that actually, about the Security Council.
Okay.
But to counter your argument about sort of the diplomacy, I think it was Azatutun, and of course I don't want to sort of prejudge, but Azatutun, for instance, called this a sign of Armenia's independence, that a foreign minister would be able to make such a snub. I mean, given that some of the statements from Russia have been pretty pro, like if not neutral, then they're pro-Azeri almost. Did Armenia have anything sort of else to do than not go?
Okay, so what was the other option? Okay, just don't participate in negotiations. So every action shall be directed towards a goal. Okay, so they were supposed to do an action to achieve a goal. Okay, without taking any action, they can't achieve any goal. Okay, I don't think it's the sign of independence. It has nothing to do with independence. Okay, there's a diplomacy. They shall go and apply diplomacy. Otherwise, okay, that's not independence. That's is isolationism.
Right.
Okay, you can isolate yourself from the world. Okay, and say I'm independence. No, it's not independence.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Armenia is dependent. Is more dependent than it has ever been since '91 when Armenia declared its independence.
Right.
Okay. Armenia was always, not always, okay, at least before 2020, Armenia was always able to protect its borders.
Mm-hmm.
Armenia was able to protect Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh. Today, Armenia is unable to do that. And in these conditions, talking about independence, come on. I understand why Azatutun said so, okay? Because they would, if the negotiations were held in Washington D.C. and Mirzoyan decided to boycott that meeting, the coverage by Azatutun would be completely different.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen this coverage myself. Yeah. Okay, I just trust your words.
No, it was part of the Sunday program by
Hayastan Tamrazian.
Tamrazian. But going back to the sort of origins of this blockade, essentially Azerbaijan claims that they're environmentalists, and I believe it was Armenian Revolutionary Federation who first brought this news that Azerbaijan basically occupies an index, 104th position in a worldwide index of environmental performance. This index was put together by Yale University, so it's a pretty reputable source. Mm-hmm. What do you think about sort of this pretext of environmentalism, and why is the world buying it? At least sort of Russia seems to be buying it. I'm not surprised about Russia, but what should Armenia do better to highlight this issue and the emptiness of this claim?
Well, there are good reasons and there are true reasons. Okay, if Azeris are so much concerned about the environment, then the Artsakh authorities said we welcome the UN inspectors to come and to check.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the UN inspectors would be less reputable or trustworthy than anyone from Azerbaijan. So it's not the issue of environment. It's just the political pressure on the Republic of Artsakh. Mm-hmm. Okay, because we understand that it's not only environment. So after the environment, they will put in other claims and other demands. But if you listen to Bayramov's speech during the conference, he also said that Lachin corridor was used to transport weapons and landmines from Armenia to Artsakh. Okay, so and this basically implied that with closing this Lachin corridor to stop transport of Armenian, landmines at least from Artsakh, which is obviously not true.
Right.
Okay, it's obviously not true. I don't know where from they could have got this information. Okay, everything is transported through closed trucks. And if Armenian side puts landmines, okay, there were no incident when Azeris captured the territory and said, okay, this is new landmines.
Yeah.
Or when it was first discovered, they would have created a lot of noise about that. Okay, like if it's like the last offensive was in March of this year in Parukh and Khramot.
Yes.
This was the only time when they could have found Armenian new landmines.
Mm-hmm.
But in March, there was no such an issue.
Right.
So this means it's a complete lie. It has nothing to do with reality. And again, if Mirzoyan was there, he could have said that. But Azeris understand that environment is a hot issue, okay, and that's why they raise this issue, okay. Otherwise, how they could have justified blocking the road?
Like imagine, I was saying one analogy would be, imagine if in 2020 when Armenians were supposed to vacate Kelbajar, Armenian environmentalists went and blocked the road. I mean, what would Azerbaijan's response be?
Oh, just firing at them. That's
Yes.
there's no issue of wandering. Okay, they will just apply force.
But that leads me basically to the role of the Armenian government, because Armenian government has been basically on a global diplomatic offensive during the blockade, and they convened the UN Security Council meeting. We heard a lot of statements, obviously, from the UN Security Council members, but nothing in the form of condemnation, like direct condemnation, I think, and resolutions especially. Why didn't Armenia, as you were saying, why didn't Armenia introduce a draft resolution despite having the right to do so? I mean, it could be only two things, right? It could be that A, it feared that it would not pass, or B, it didn't want to?
Well,
I'm not sure.
a very good question. Yeah, Armenia has staged a diplomatic offensive, but is it effective? So far, no. The most important tool was tabling a resolution through a friendly country, but Armenian foreign minister didn't do even that.
In fact,
because just open debate has one weight, and a resolution that should be observed is another thing.
Aram Orbelian, an international law expert, was here last week, and he said basically Armenia, as part of that meeting, because even it wasn't invited, it was not a permanent member, it could have introduced a resolution without even a friendly third country.
Okay, if that's another option,
Yes.
then Armenia itself should have tabled.
Right.
But if the procedure doesn't allow that, then Armenia should have done that through another member of the Security Council, not necessarily permanent, but permanent member.
Right.
And if you listen to the speeches of some members of the Security Council, not even permanent members, you know, they were more pro-Armenian, they were more pro-Artsakh than the Armenian government itself. Like listen to the Irish delegation statement. They speak about the status of Artsakh. So when the last time you heard the word status of Artsakh from the lips of Armenian member of Armenian authority?
Right.
So Armenian authorities decided to bury this issue. They camouflage that by some, you know, the rights of people of Artsakh. Okay, they have the right of worship. Okay, Azerbaijan comes and says, okay, we guarantee the right of worship. But Shushi is not an Armenian church, it's an Udi church. The church in Stepanakert is an Armenian church, go and worship in Stepanakert. Or we guarantee the right of rest. Okay, you work, 40 hours a week, you have your 2 days of weekend. Okay, but the core of the problem is the right of the people for self-determination and the status of Artsakh. And the Armenian government does nothing. And one remark, okay, you remember that, you might remember, or your audience might remember, that on the 2nd of December we tabled a resolution or a statement of the National Assembly in response to the statement by Azeri Milli Majlis. And in that statement we had three major messages. That people of Artsakh have the right of self-determination. Artsakh is the republic, is not just a geographical location, and Armenia is a guarantor of security of Artsakh Republic. The parliamentary majority blocked that statement. It didn't pass, and in 24 hours, Azeris started these provocations on the Lachin corridor.
Right.
So, they use Armenia's policy of concessions. Okay, the more Armenia goes for concessions, the more aggressive Azeris become. And Armenian foreign ministry doesn't do anything to show that Armenia is there and Armenia is strong and Armenia is ready to protect the people of Artsakh.
Speaking of protection of people of Artsakh, the 120,000 people, the citizens of Artsakh, aren't they also technically citizens of the Republic of Armenia? And so far, I think the Armenian government has basically been said that, Artsakh and the people inside are the responsibility of the Russian peacekeepers. But doesn't Armenia have, as you're saying, a more sort of immediate responsibility of actually serving?
Absolutely. Armenia has been the guarantor of safety and security and was representing Artsakh on international arena since 1988. even during the Soviet time. Today, the current government has washed its hands from the problem. Okay, they say, okay, Artsakh, go and negotiate directly with Azerbaijan. But the bargaining power of Artsakh and bargaining power of Azerbaijan, are not equal. That's why Armenia shall represent Artsakh, and Armenia shall say that, if anything happens to Artsakh, it means anything happens to Armenia. Right. So Armenia and Artsakh are united, are the same. These people have Armenian travel documents, they have Armenian passports. But even if they don't, technically, okay, they say, okay, no, it's, if it's a Republic of Artsakh, they cannot be members of, Armenian citizens. Okay, technically, they can go into that demagogy. But they're Armenians, they're ethnic Armenians, and there's no difference. It's Armenian who lives in Artsakh, Armenian who lives in Zangil, in Syunik, Armenian who lives in Yerevan, Shirak, or Vanadzor.
Right.
So these are the same Armenians, okay? Now, I don't understand this approach, okay? Let's sacrifice 120,000 Armenians. Let's sacrifice Artsakh for the sake of Armenia. No, Azeris do not want Artsakh only. They want the whole Armenia. When they absorb Artsakh, occupy Artsakh, expel Armenians from Artsakh, the second target will be Syunik. And Azerbaijan, look, they said, so it's Western, we have Western Nakhichevan, Western, how they call it?
Western Azerbaijan.
Western Azerbaijan. So
in fact, that was a statement made by over the weekend by Aliyev. Our MFA this time did respond, and I want to quote what they said. Aggressive actions carried out by Azerbaijan against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh are part of the consistent policy of ethnic cleansing of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Well, it's not aggression against the people, it's aggression against the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, and today it has a form of humanitarian crisis. Okay, but the target is the Republic, is the political, is a political unit.
Right.
Okay. So if we say, okay, it's aggression against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, it can be construed as an aggression against national minority inside Azerbaijan. But, no, it's the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh, have decided on their political future.
So if basically, as you're saying, the Armenian government is willfully basically ignoring the right of self-determination, and that's what basically is meant by saying the people of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Oh, of course. They say, okay, the representative of Armenian, in his last interview, Pashinyan's last interview, even used the term, the representatives of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. Okay?
Right.
This means he thinks, or the political position of the government is that Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh are national minority inside Azerbaijan.
Many apologists for Pashinyan say that we have to say these things right now, but in his heart he's working towards he's working towards a good future for Artsakh. I specifically want to talk about essentially this strategy of remedial secession, which Pashinyan's team has argued that they should be Armenia's strategy, and just this past week, Foreign Minister Zohrab Artsakhan said that it is now a necessity. Do you think that basically they're saying that, okay, fine, we'll acknowledge, or we won't raise the issue of self-determination, but we will push remedial secession sometime in the future?
Well, I'm not a cardiologist. I don't know what's in Pashinyan's heart, but I can see his policy. Okay, this continuous concessions to Azerbaijan make bad worse. Okay, this was their policy for the last 2 years. Okay, they said we cannot be implicit, we cannot be very vocal on the right of people of Artsakh for self-determination, but under the surface we will push this agenda. I don't know what's going on under the ground, under the surface. I can see what's going on the surface, and I can see that the situation today is much worse than the situation on the 1st of December. The situation on the 1st of December was much worse than on the 1st of November. 1st of November this year was much worse than 1st of November of 2021. Okay, so they pushed the same, they exercise the same policy, and the situation is getting worse. The conventional logic says that the policy is wrong. Okay, because if you do the same thing and the situation is getting worse and worse, this means what you do is wrong.
So some politicians and analysts, such as, for instance, Avetik Chalabian, say that without engaging the military, Armenia will not be able to unblock the corridor. What can Armenia do? I mean, does Armenia have the capacity to engage Azerbaijan militarily?
It's hard to answer today whether we have the capacity or not, but if the issue is, okay, the 120,000 people are going to die, then of course we do not have any chance. But to avoid that, the diplomacy shall work, the foreign affairs shall work.
Mm-hmm.
And by boycotting this meeting in Moscow, by passive and inefficient and ineffective diplomacy, they are moving Armenia closer to another war. Because obviously Azerbaijan has other appetite. Their appetite is not limited by Artsakh. I'm repeating myself, but that's truth. Okay? And
Right.
if today Armenia doesn't say we will defend Artsakh by every possible means, tomorrow the Azeris will put other claims, other demands.
Right.
And today they say, okay, you've promised Zangezur corridor. So what will be the Armenian response? We cannot say no to Azerbaijan because today we won't be able to militarily engage with them. And plus, okay, let me remind that 5 years ago Armenia was successful on military affairs.
Yes.
And even Pashinyan and his people in July 2020, after this small military clash in Tavush, okay, let me remind you his words. Okay, Armenia has proved once again that we have the most powerful state in the region. We have the most powerful army. His advisor, who later on became Minister of Defense, who is currently Armenia's ambassador to Russia, Arthur Khachatryan, said that Armenia's military capacity to destroy Azeri economy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Armenia was able to protect itself, and during Pashinyan's time, Armenia is not able to do, at least today. And the second, okay, I'm not sure it's truth or not. It's true or not. If Armenia has the right military command and competent officers, Armenia would be able to protect itself.
In your resolution that was basically vetoed or not even sort of put forward by or prevented from being put forward by the government, you mentioned there are elements of recognition of Artsakh's self-determination. Diplomatically speaking, is overt recognition of Artsakh a possibility? For instance, maybe through some kind of an act that is signed by the Prime Minister, assuming that there is a different Prime Minister, establishing diplomatic ties with Artsakh and so forth, and all the sort of other acts of recognition. Do you think that could be something that Armenia could do in this current situation?
No, possibly, but let me answer to the first part of your, not question, but of your remark, okay? The right for self-determination was the basis of negotiations underway since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
On the 30th of June, the Minsk Group co-chairs put forward a proposal, basic principles, they call it basic principles, that will govern the resolution of the settlement of the conflict. And that was right of people to self-determination. And then, you refrain of using force or threat to use force, and also the territorial integrity. But the right for self-determination was the core principles that will govern the resolution of the conflict. And then we have the case of International Court of Justice, the advisory opinion in International Court of Justice, that on the Kosovo, that said that territorial integrity has nothing to do with the right of nations to self-determination, right of peoples to self-determination. Right. So it's not me who says that. That international community for the last 15 years says that the political settlement of the conflict will be based on these core principles. But second, okay, of course, Armenia has to do lots of homework. Okay, they have to work intensively with other countries, because if only Armenia comes that says we accept the independence of Artsakh and we establish diplomatic ties and we exchange ambassadors, but no other country follows Armenia, that will be ineffective. Okay, but the day after Armenia declares, establishment of diplomatic ties, or means acknowledges the independence, the other countries shall follow, otherwise it won't be effective. But I don't see that Armenian diplomacy is working in that direction. Armenian governments, previous governments, think we are not doing that, not to hinder the negotiation process. But once the negotiation process was hindered, okay, it was basically destroyed, collapsed, and Azerbaijan staged a war against Armenia and Artsakh. On the next day, Armenia should have acknowledged the independence of Artsakh.
Mr. Khachatryan, your alliance, the Hayastan or Armenia alliance, and generally the parliamentary opposition have been publicly critical of Pashinyan and how his team is handling this crisis and the cause of Artsakh in general. There's this criticism of you saying that, by criticizing Pashinyan vocally, you weaken his hands in negotiations. How would you respond to that?
No. Did they bring any arguments to support their case? Pashinyan does what he does, and unfortunately, the opposition was not able to change his policy. Okay, so I know this. His supporters say, okay, if you criticize him, he's less efficient on the international arena, but he does what he does. Okay, if he listened to us, if he changes his policy, Armenia would be more efficient, more effective, and we would see results of his policy. But today we don't see anything,
right?
Because the core of the problem is their belief that if we go for concessions on Artsakh, we'll be able to sign the peace treaty. But any concession brings requests for new concessions. And the second, peace treaty, what's peace treaty? Okay, let's go to Versailles. Okay, it was peace treaty, it was victory of France, but defeat of Germany. Okay, so what's the text of this peace treaty?
Yeah.
Okay, for the peace to be lasting, it should be based on justice and fairness. And justice said the right of the people of Artsakh to self-determination should be respected.
Also, the opposition repeatedly says that it is critical a critical requirement to reverse the country's downhill slide, basically, is regime change, especially since after the 44-day war. And the opposition held rallies in the spring of 2022 to do that. The efforts were not successful. Has the opposition concluded lessons learned to understand essentially what went wrong and how to move forward from that moment? What were the primary reasons for the failure of the opposition?
Well, changing the regime is not the goal. Changing the regime is the tool to achieve the goal, and the goal is just to save Artsakh and Armenia, to change the policy that Armenia is currently exercising. And to do that, to achieve that, the regime should be changed. Well, yeah, so far we were not successful in changing the regime. So if not the opposition, Pashinyan would have gone for concessions much further, and this so-called peace treaty that will recognize Azerbaijan's jurisdiction over Republic of Artsakh would have been signed already. So in that sense, opposition was successful. In changing the government is still there, so yeah, I agree your criticism. Of course, we've taken lessons, and we've done some corrections in our tactics, and we hope that we'll be able to achieve this goal. Because if Pashinyan stays in power, he will pass Artsakh under Azeri's jurisdiction, and the threat will be, Armenia will be subject to Azeri's next offensive. Because don't forget that Azerbaijan requests Zangezur corridor. As far as I understand, they want sovereign passage. They want a corridor, though there is no universal definition of corridor, but I don't think they want just the right to traverse in this region, on this road.
Yeah,
and plus, again, because of the Aliyev statement,
yes,
Western Nakhichevan, Western Azerbaijan, we want Gökçe, this means Sevan, it's the name of Sevan in Turkish, and we want Erevan. This is the Yerevan, version of Yerevan in Turkish, in Azeri. So it's an existential problem. It's an existential threat to not only the Republic of Artsakh, Republic of Armenia, but to the Armenian nation.
Yesterday, there were mass rallies in Artsakh, and tens of thousands essentially filled up the Renaissance Square in Stepanakert. These were organized by the government, and State Minister Ruben Vartanyan addressed the protesters. And it's interesting to note how violently negative Azerbaijan's leadership has been towards Vartanyan. They discuss everything from calling him like a Russian puppet to even sort of discussing assassinations of him.
Yeah, I've seen these videos. Okay, they with parallels that we were successful in targeting Jalal Harutyunyan's car. We can target your cars.
Exactly.
Beware, and so on.
So, what do you think basically is expected from Ruben Vartanyan as State Minister of Artsakh Republic? And why is Azerbaijan so anti-Vartanyan, rabidly anti-Vartanyan, to say?
I assume Vartanyan assumed this responsibility to change the situation on the ground, to show that Republic of Artsakh, the Artsakh government, our government's position can be different from the position of the Yerevan government. And obviously they don't like that, and that's why they personally threat Vartanyan. Because they see that something's gonna change. Something has already changed. So, these other threats and this pressure on Karabakh were followed by Vartanyan assuming his office.
And also Vartanyan held an interview a week ago where he basically criticized Armenia and in general sort of different institutions for being indifferent. I think sort of, the blame was placed all around, but also explicitly the Armenian government. Do you see Artsakh breaking away from Armenia in terms of foreign policy, or synchronizing foreign policy with Armenia, and in pursuit of self-determination?
I think it was Armenia's government who decided to break away first. And Vardanyan says just the opposite. Okay, you cannot break away because we are two countries, but one nation, one state, one people. Of course, he has to sort of criticize the Armenian society, but obviously this was sort of not a camouflaged accusation against the government of Armenia for government's position, for government stance.
Right.
And look, Armenia's public television's coverage of the protests in Artsakh. It was a shame. And the post of the Prime Minister's wife was a shame. And we understand that she is not a private person, okay? Being the wife of the de facto head of the state puts some limitations.
Just to add some context, basically the Prime Minister's wife, on the day of the protest in Artsakh, remembered that 2 years ago, her tent city in Artsakh was taken down because it was just right after the war and there was a lot of resentment, and she blamed the adults for using children as a weapon and call them egoistical and so forth. But that was from 2 years ago, right? Or was there something new that happened that she...
That was 2 years ago, but her message was much more dangerous. Okay, it says now the kids will think that their fathers or the adults, if the adults were so strong, they were managed to put these her tents down. Why they don't go and put Azeri's tent down?
Right.
And plus, there were a few very dangerous messages. Okay, we cannot hide on the in the backs of the children and 18, 20-year-old soldiers. Okay, so basically, she says we cannot fight for our rights. We cannot jeopardize Armenia for the lives of 120,000 people. But again, it's a very wrong perception. It's a very dangerous statement. Azeris are not after Artsakh. Azeris are after Armenians.
Yeah.
Azeris and Turks, okay, because there's no difference. There's a pan-Turkish policy. There's
also this argument that if you're for children, and if your enemy says that sort of we're gonna basically is very violently anti-Armenian, why would you condemn these children to such a future in a non-independent Artsakh? But that's sort of my own take on it. It was also very disheartening to see that comment. Anyway, I think that this has been an interesting discussion, Mr. Khachatryan. Thank you for your time, and we are out of time. But
thanks for the invite.
So this has been a collaboration between Groong and 168 Hours. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that this crisis ends, but we will try to provide timely coverage as things develop. Thank you very much.